Alright, let's do this one last time. On January 2nd, I made a video responding to a short clip of this video from YouTube titled Spider-Man 2 is disgusting woke propaganda that was circulating on TikTok, in which the creator complains about the woke and political content in the new Spider-Man 2 game for the PlayStation 5. Mainly the Brooklyn Vision side mission where Miles helps a gay kid ask his boyfriend to homecoming. After the video gained traction, I made a follow-up video responding to comments from the original video, which received nearly 3 times the comments in half the time. And while most of them aren't even worth rebuttals at this point, there are a few more comments, negative and otherwise, that I do want to take the time to respond to. This will be my final video regarding this topic, and that I am officially putting this discussion to rest and moving on with my content. And with my life. Also, just a brief warning that there will be very, very brief mentions of grooming, terrorism, and predatory behavior at these timestamps. Without any further ado, let's get into it. In part 1, somebody wrote a comment about disagreeing peacefully and stated that they disagreed with queerness due to their religion. I responded in part 2 by stating that it is immoral to disagree with being queer altogether, religious or not, and they stated, I mostly agree with you except for the part about morals. When it comes to morals, for me, it's a gray area because everyone thinks differently and not everyone has the same morals. This is 100% true. I will admit that immoral was the wrong word to use in this situation, especially when trying to make a logical argument, and I have no issue taking accountability for doing so. But with all due respect, my point still stands. It is indeed harmful to disagree with being queer, including in the name of religion. Are there things that pretty much everyone thinks are wrong? Yes, and the sad truth is that the LGBTQ+ community, as of right now, is seen in a bad light, so when there is a queer character, it will feel forced. Until the community is no longer seen as bad or weird, it will likely remain this way for a long time. So I could be reading this wrong, but in the case that I'm not, I want to assure you that I am fully aware that at least until the queer community is no longer as marginalized as they are today, comments like these are going to appear anytime a video game incorporates queer people in any capacity, especially widely popular video game franchises like Spider-Man, and that is pretty much inevitable. However, just because anti-queer comments can't necessarily be stopped doesn't mean that we simply do nothing. If we waited until the queer community was no longer viewed negatively by general society before we began incorporating them into media and entertainment, the simple fact is we would not receive any representation whatsoever for a long time. Not all issues are solved simply by ignoring them until circumstances eventually change. Dismantling homophobia institutionally and socially requires actively advocating for change. Don't respond to trolls or idiots. It never looks good. Also, don't defend groups of people that's literally prejudiced and bigoted. You can't bless an entire group as well as you can't damn one. Going forward, I will refrain from engaging with trolls. I admit that I should have known better than to do so, and I have no issue apologizing for that. However, defending a marginalized group whose existence in a video game, and furthermore their existence altogether, is being criticized is not prejudiced or bigoted in any capacity. If my arguments were prejudiced and or bigoted, I would be antagonizing people solely on the basis of their identity without any reason, but I am in fact doing the opposite. I am responding to their harmful arguments against a certain group, in our case, the queer community. One might say, but Isaiah, what about the comment you made about cis straight able-bodied white men? But I was not attacking cis straight able-bodied white men solely for being cis straight able-bodied white men. As I clarified in the last video, I was pointing out an issue with certain cis straight able-bodied white men who protest stories simply because a certain part of that story does not entirely consist of their demographic. Also, I understand that it's impossible to bless an entire group, but once again, just because it's impossible to bless an entire group doesn't mean that I cannot continue to advocate for change and refute illogical, bigoted talking points. In the original video, I stated that nobody is being forced to play the homecoming side mission, and somebody comments, you are forced to play the mission if you want to unlock the Bariqua suit and 100% the game. I understand that this is a requirement to 100% complete the game, and I acknowledge that I could have given this more consideration and included it in my argument. However, it is still an objective fact that as a whole, this side mission is completely optional and the game doesn't force you to play it or believe anything about gay people, and my point still stands in that regard. And also, if making a side mission about a gay couple a requirement to 100% the game is therefore shoving it down your throat, the exact same would be true for the main plot, which contains multiple heterosexual couples. I just wanted to play a Spider-Man game and not think about any of that stuff. The only slight problem I have with the game is Black Cat being bi. I feel like it's weird to change a character for inclusiveness, propaganda, or whatever. She's a pre-existing character who doesn't show any hints or interest in the same gender, and they just threw it out there in the second game. It just feels forced. Maybe it's just me, but it just didn't feel right. So firstly, I want to establish again that the comic book version of Felicia Hardy has been alluded to and later confirmed as being bisexual since long before any of the PlayStation exclusive Spider-Man games were launched. And as we all know, the movie and video game reiterations of the 616 characters are similar to them to some degree. agree. So it's not a change, but rather Insomniac following through with that aspect of her character. Not to mention, you can't technically change an aspect of a character that wasn't explicitly confirmed in the first place, and just because Black Cat dated a man doesn't automatically mean she's straight. Secondly, there is no aspect of Black Cat simply being bisexual, or any queer character in any story for that matter, that inherently promotes propaganda. And lastly, even if having to think about queerness were negative in any way, there are very few instances throughout the game where you would do so, and queer people can be in a Spider-Man game and it remains a Spider-Man game. In part 1, I responded to a comment saying the game should include options to filter out gay content, and someone left a comment on my video saying that they should filter out gay content because, quote, kids don't need to know about anyone's sexuality, and later accusing me of promoting grooming. I responded to them in part 2, and they left another comment saying, no, we just want kids to grow. After they're 18, that's their choice. Until then, I believe parents should have those decisions with their children, not video games and social media. Firstly, you stated after they're 18, that's their choice, but the thing is, this statement is generally used by parents who don't want their children to be queer. So are you saying that people shouldn't learn about queer people until they're 18, or that they shouldn't use any queer identity until they're 18? If it's the latter, this isn't even relevant to the conversation because we're not talking about the identity of the kid themselves, and a side mission in a video game that depicts a gay couple isn't going to convert children to being queer. But, as somebody else pointed out in their replies to you, if children shouldn't be allowed to make decisions related to their orientation, then using your own logic, the exact same would be true for straight relationships, and it would simply be irresponsible and ill-advised to refuse to teach them anything relating to the concepts of love and emotional regulation until adulthood. If it's the former, what you need to understand is that it is simply unrealistic to suggest that children should go through the entirety of their childhood without being taught about queer people and identities. The simple fact is, children are inevitably going to encounter all different forms of diversity, both in reality and in video games, throughout their lives. And it is so important that children are taught to embrace all forms of diversity from a young age, so that they learn how to understand and properly interact with people who are different from them, and adapt to a continuously and significantly evolving world. And some might attempt to argue that by this same logic, it's also justified for children to be taught that the likes of terrorists and predators are beneficial, but this is a false equivalency, as simply being queer alone has no negative impact. Secondly, in your previous comment, you stated that kids don't need to know about sexuality that exists outside of heterosexuality, and here you state that parents are the only ones at liberty to make those decisions. And I don't think I need to tell you why suggesting that parents can only accept their children if they're straight is problematic. And to add to that, once again, if children have no liberty to decide their orientation or identity, and that falls upon the parent, using your logic, it is also justified for parents to accept their kids as queer. And finally, the simple fact is, a video game is not making decisions for a kid simply by including a gay couple in a story. The next few comments are all from the same person. You've made an entire video highlighting people's beliefs and distaste with certain content and proceed to make fun of them for it. If people don't want woke and pride stuff shoved down their throat, they can skip the mission, and if you don't want homophobia for supporting that, don't make a big deal about it, then create a whole video about the comments. Replying to someone's comment in the comment section is one thing, but when you create a whole video about them, it's just for attention and to bring to light and humiliate people who disagree with you. I don't think you'd appreciate someone publicly speaking about your video and making fun of it, so you shouldn't be doing this if you aren't prepared and accepting others' opinions and beliefs. Firstly, just to get it out of the way, homophobia and homophobic rhetoric should not be downplayed to simply beliefs and opinions. These beliefs aren't just harmful because I don't like them. They are blatantly intolerant of a marginalized group, and I'm sorry if people who are against queer people simply existing in a video game because they are queer feel humiliated when someone refutes their bigotry. I do acknowledge that some of these people were expressing beliefs unrelated to queerness, even if they are illogical. As such, I will be more respectful to people with those arguments going forward, provided that their initial comments are respectful. But all of the comments shown in part 2, as well as the majority of the talking points presented in part 1, were rooted in homophobia. And if your initial argument is homophobic or contains any bigotry whatsoever, I see no reason that I am obligated to be respectful to you. Secondly, you stated that I'm making these videos solely for attention, and I want to assure you that it's quite the opposite. I upload my videos simply to provide my perspective on issues, and I wouldn't care if my videos got 10 views or thousands. I used to care a lot more, but I learned to let go of that. The real reason I make video responses to multiple comments at a time is simply because it's quicker and easier way to address everyone's arguments. That, and it's better for me to speak my mind than it is to type. Not to mention, trying to have multiple conversations in a comment section at once gets tiresome at a certain point. Also, others are more than welcome to make video responses to me, especially if a certain aspect of my argument is flawed, in which case, as you have seen, I am fully willing to take accountability for this. Lastly, the entirety of my content revolves around giving my perspective on issues and responding to others' perspectives if they are bigoted, harmful, illogical, or all of the above. and if everybody simply ignored differing perspectives or accepted bigotry simply for the sake of not making a big deal about it, not only would more people be outwardly hateful towards marginalized groups, but many other commentary channels and accounts across multiple different platforms, a lot of which are likely bigger than my own, would not exist. I mean, the original creator literally made a 1-hour video complaining about the wokeness in the game essentially the entire duration of the video, but I make a couple of videos responding to those arguments and others, and suddenly I'm obligated to accept and tolerate blatantly bigoted ideas? You should be able to believe both perspectives. If someone believes that the mission is unnecessary and shoving beliefs down people's throats, then they should be able to hold this opinion and express it. The same way that people should be able to express and hold a belief that it should be in the game because it represents a part of the world that people want to ignore. My point is that you can believe and express how you feel and discuss it. 1. Not just towards me, but in response to other commenters as well, you have continuously downplayed rhetoric of this nature simply to beliefs and opinions and mindsets, as if they are innocent and non-harmful. Yes, they are beliefs, but what you need to understand is that these are discriminatory, intolerant beliefs that go against a group that is already marginalized, and that simply cannot be justified. And 2, I understand and have never denied that people have complete and total liberty to hold differing perspectives and present differing arguments, and by simply making a video responding to them, I am not stripping them of or infringing on that right. However, just because you have the right to present a differing argument doesn't automatically mean that it's valid or that it can't be illogical, and freedom of speech does not equal freedom from consequences. One's right to spew harmful rhetoric does not then automatically exempt them from the subsequent social consequences and criticism of others in response to that rhetoric, nor does it cancel out others' right to said criticism. Put simply, others can express anti-queer ideas and values, and that is well within their rights, just as it is within my right to respond. That is how arguments work. They state in multiple different comments that a lot of the things I'm accusing the commenters of doing, I am guilty of also. I asked them to elaborate, and these are each of the reasons they gave. You can't say, I can express and believe my opinion, but you can't, and the reason I get to express and believe it is because I believe I'm right. Like I established before, I fully acknowledge that other people have the right to express their ideas and values, but that doesn't mean they can't be illogical, nor does it mean I can't offer my own arguments and rebuttals. I never told any of these people that they cannot present their arguments. I'm explaining to them why they are harmful and illogical. You say that it's always easier to move on from things you don't agree with, but you don't apply the same logic to your video. If you don't like those comments, move on, not create an entire video making fun of and shaming people for opinions. You sound like you want to be inclusive and not discriminate, but you're not open to diverse thoughts. So firstly, for a little more context, in the comment section of my original video, somebody said that people should just accept certain things instead of making a big deal about that thing. And what I was trying to say is that I understand the perspective of disagreeing peacefully to an extent. I agree that it's easier, but it can't be hypocrisy because agreeing that it's easier is not the same thing as thinking that everyone should do. I understand that the wording was wonky on my part, and I will absolutely assume accountability for that. Secondly, once again, it is harmful to downplay homophobic rhetoric to simply opinions. And lastly, as I stated before, going forward, as long as the initial arguments are respectful and non-bigoted, I will be respectful to them. But it is incorrect to assert that I am simply not open to diverse thoughts and mindsets, and especially when people are literally condemning queer people for existing in a fictional story and claiming that I promote grooming, therefore perpetuating the ongoing stigma that queer people are inherently predators. They went on to say that I tore down somebody's comment by saying that they regurgitate the same phrases and then continue to push a mainstream narrative and use woke mainstream terms, phrases, and buzzwords throughout my video. The reason that I claimed this person was regurgitating the same talking points was because the commenter practically repeated the exact same argument from the original video without a single attempt at responding to or countering my argument. The commenter says this game forces things down your throat at literally every opportunity. It's not homophobic to want to escape from all the political craziness they've decided to fill the game to the brim with, and the very first claim that the original creator from my first video made is, there are countless examples throughout the campaign of Spider-Man where this forced political, ideological bullshit is forced down your throat at literally every opportunity. Do you see now how the commenter almost repeats the initial argument without any attempt at analyzing or replying to my initial argument? That is regurgitation. All of the arguments I make in my videos are my own. Anytime I repeated myself, it was only because others were responding with the same talking point. It seems like you heard these terms and phrases and immediately assumed that I was using them without understanding what they mean or where to correctly apply them. I assure you that if I did not know what the terms meant, I would not include them in my arguments. One might say, but Isaiah, didn't you open the video with the point about messing up the term immorality? But I didn't use the word wrong. It just wasn't the correct word for the situation. After a brief discussion about one of their comments being removed by YouTube, they offered to have a peaceful chat on another platform, and I was considering accepting this offer until I went to the comment section on the other video and saw them being blatantly ableist. Nice one. So there y'all have it. This is my final discussion about queer content in the Spider-Man games. At least until more queer content appears in other popular video games, and inevitably the homophobes do as well. Hopefully someday in the far future, the gaming community won't be anything like this. Thank you to everyone who stayed throughout the entire series, and have the day you deserve.